So you might want to just go to speaker view and highlight Katie for when she's presenting, and then you'll see her wonderful, beautiful face and be able to focus a little bit more. Thank you, Katie. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am going to share my screen to start with, so you don't have to see my face necessarily. Oh. So this session for today, I like to give things titles. I'm sure quite a lot of you do as well. I have entitled Safeguarding as the Church Enters the Online Era. And I must admit, it is not my catchiest title yet, but sometimes you just need a title to say exactly what you need it to say. Whether we are thrilled about this or not, the online era is where the church has been forced to move into over the past year. And generally, my experience in the past is that the church has often either resisted or avoided or not thought it relevant to have an intensive online presence. Many churches have had websites and some social media accounts, such as Facebook. However, in the past year, the church has had to engage and adapt with the online world like never before. And now there are lots of individuals and groups that are looking into the endless possibilities of how we can spread the good news of the gospel in this online environment. And I fully admit that this pandemic has been horrific for all of us, I think. It's been the worst experience in terms of mental health, physical health, financial loss, poverty, deprivation. All of that has just been absolutely horrific for everybody. But it undoubtedly, in my opinion, has pushed the church in a way that it needed to go and in a direction that it needed to go. And I don't know whether we would have ever reached that place without that really strong, firm push into the online arena. But where does it all leave us? I mean, for some of you, there will be feelings of excitement, elation, and, you know, continuing to explore this diverse and new way of being church. For others of you, there will be immense fear and trepidation. For others, there will be this longing and this yearning to return back to normal, so we can be part of our church communities in buildings once again. But however you are feeling, it just genuinely seems like there's going to be no turning back from this online world that the church has now become a part of. We are all working incredibly differently, and that's not going to be dropped as soon as churches are fully reopened again. And I think part of us just needs to embrace what is before us, but learning to navigate the online world with care and safety as well. So this morning, I want us to be really honest and truthful before God about how we might be feeling. So if you have a piece of paper to hand or just your phone or anything in front of you that you can potentially just write something down on, I just want you to write a word or a couple of words that sums up how you might be feeling today. How you might be feeling about church in the online world, how you might be feeling about our current situation and the future as we start to see a sense of normality return. And if you want to share publicly how you're feeling, just write a word or two perhaps in the chat section. But just take a deep breath and a couple of minutes, just really try and think about how you are genuinely feeling at the moment and potentially just jot those words down. So there's a few words appearing in our chat, and I'm hoping you can all see those, and you can go back and read through some of those. And some of you will have put different things down, I'm sure, on your piece of paper. Some of the things from the chat: confused, unsure, excited, quite a few exciteds actually, but a few apprehensives and cautious, hopeful. I love this one, meh, which is, yeah, genuine feeling as well. Happy, emotional, tired, fed up, uncertain. Gosh, there's all sorts really of feelings appearing in that chat, and I will go back and read some of them again later. But it obviously, just from what's appeared in the chat, you'll have written different things down as well, and some of those will be really personal to you. But it's probably, we're all feeling a huge variety of different things at the moment. But one word that has really been cropping up for me over the past week or so is the word weary. And I'm sensing that, funnily enough, I'm sensing that in lots of the meetings that I've been in as well. There's just this genuine sense that people are really just tired and fed up, and just, yeah, weary is just the best way of describing it. And I think we probably can all relate to that in some way at the moment. Whilst I've just sort of expressed my enthusiasm really for the church becoming a presence online, I'm also weary of solely being online. And my hope for the future is that there will be that balance, that there'll be room for both worlds. And I feel really blessed as well at the moment, the fact that we've got these ways of bringing people together via Zoom really quickly. And I think it's definitely changed the way that I work forever. But must say, I am weary of always having to see my face on the screen. I am really weary of always looking at a screen. Next month, it will be a year, won't it, since the first lockdown next month. Which means we've had a year of all of this, of COVID-19 news, of being unable to connect with others socially, having to social distance, face masks, hand sanitizer, online shopping, all of that. And just, yeah, I think weary is very much an understandable feeling at the moment. A reading from Isaiah 40, verses 28 to 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those whose hope is in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God. If, like me, you are in that weary zone and you are feeling a bit tired, do you not know? Have you not heard that our God is one of strength and power, which he gives to each one of us, not just to sustain us, but in this verse, it talks about the fact that they will soar on wings like eagles. Just not strength so that we can be sustained, but strength so that we can flourish and grow and be everything that God desires us to be. But in the same way that you might rest a tired body, we sometimes need to allow our tired and weary souls to rest in the presence of God. And something that I would encourage you to do, if you find space in between your Zoom meetings this week, is to just find those moments of rest with God. But let's just together try and find some rest in God's presence. Before we talk about this, all the aspects of social media, just let us try and find that rest with God. The one who can give us that strength that we need, not just for today, but continually. There's going to be some images on the screen, and I'll just say a few visual words that might help take us to that place of rest with God. If you want to switch off your camera so you feel more comfortable, then you please do so. But let us just be still. And in the stillness, ask God to be with you and wash over your heart. Visualize God pouring his grace and mercy into your life. Feel God's caring hands holding yours, offering both comfort and protection. Release all that is weighing you down and set it aside. Take a deep breath and find your rest in God today. Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress, and I will never be shaken. Amen. And a blessing for this day. Lord Jesus, you are a shield around me, strong in love, heavy with power, shaped with hope and guided with truth. I will fear no evil, for you watch over me. You defend and deliver me. In this day, this hour, this moment, I put my trust in you. Amen. I would encourage you throughout this week to just find those moments of rest and stillness. I think one thing with being online is that actually we cram much more into our days. Sometimes it feels like we have back-to-back meetings of Zoom, and I just encourage you to be kind to yourself and think about how you can just get those moments of not just rest and peace with God, but just physically, mentally resting. So today, interestingly, yesterday was Safer Internet Day. And today we're going to be looking at sort of safety aspects on social media. It almost feels as if we planned this, but we haven't. It just fell naturally with what was happening in this week. But just a little bit about me before I continue. So I have been a district safeguarding officer for the past 3 years. I work in the Yorkshire North and East Methodist district. Before that, I worked in education, largely with children who had special educational needs and barriers to learning. And prior to that, I was a youth worker in various different settings, having completed a degree in youth work and ministry. I've been involved with churches since I was born, let's say that, and I've been part of different denominations. But for the last 8 years, I've been part of the Methodist Church. And although today is about exploring online safeguarding issues with you, I am by no means a digital expert. I will confess that now. I do not know the ins and outs of every social media platform. And when people start talking about different online software and different apps and things like that, it starts to kind of slowly go over my head because I can't really keep up with what's going on. I do have to do quite a lot of study and a lot of research really to find out what's out there, because I find that I just can't keep up. This period throughout the pandemic has been a really steep learning curve for safeguarding officers. We've never had so many inquiries about the safety aspects of the online world before. And the Methodist Church hasn't quite got all the policies ready yet in terms of developing those to deal with some of the questions that we've had. So we've been very much trying to find our way, as much as some of you have as well. So please bear with us if you do have any questions. If you do have any questions throughout today's session, whilst we're exploring these issues, then feel free to put them in the chat section. I'm not the best with timing, I will admit that now, so I probably won't get time to answer them at the end, but what I will do, if there's lots of questions and things, I will get an email response to you at some point later. If you have any specific concerns or specific questions relating to situations that you're dealing with, save those and then you can speak to one of your district safeguarding officers later. Whilst I might not be a digital expert, I am passionate about safeguarding and keeping members of our church and wider communities safe in every aspect and in every sense of what that word means. So our goal today is really to look at what is unsafe about the online world, so that we're better equipped, better prepared, and that we potentially can proactively start to do things to help tackle some of these issues, and that we can potentially put things in place to keep ourselves safe, or where we can spot some of the concerns and raise the alarm. If you are around my age, I'm the grand old age of 35 now. If you are around my age, or just slightly younger or older than me, I can't see all your faces at the moment, so I'm not going to guess ages, but if you're around my age or older, you will have experienced childhood and teenage years without online capabilities. But every generation that follows, my generation, will not know what the world was like before the online, before it became online. The first web page was developed and went live on the 6th of August 1991, which is 30 years ago, if my maths is correct, and I'm good at maths. It was 30 years ago this coming August. And this is what the first web page looked like. And it is literally a web page about the World Wide Web. So it offers different information about the World Wide Web. This is the first web page. It's not very riveting, but that's what it looked like. And towards the end of 1991, there was just this one website in existence, this one registered website. Fast forward to today, there are around 51% of the world's population online. There are websites in over 200 languages. There are about 1.6 billion websites. I will say that not all of those are active, only about 15% of those are active. I can't really do maths on that, but I'm assuming 15% of 1.6 billion websites is still quite a massive number. There are thousands of different social media platforms, and what we mean by social media platforms, these are websites or apps with a specific purpose in mind to allow people to communicate with one another. If you're a person that gets slightly baffled by this and confused by it all, please just remember that one thing. The purpose of social media is to allow people to communicate with one another. And it's no different from any of these things, which might be so familiar to some of you. Although my husband didn't know what this one in the left-hand corner is. Some of you might know. I'll explain it to you later if you don't. But the benefit of social media is that it's far quicker to communicate. And because of the scale of it, there are many different ways in which we can engage with people and be creative and diverse in the way that we communicate with people. I don't want to, I love this. It's just a way of splitting down. We call it the social web. So the different ways that you can socialize with people are really, really vast and are split into different ways. So for instance, there's the gaming world and virtual worlds, online gaming where you can communicate with people, social networking, which is like your Facebook, there's microblogging, which is Twitter, video, YouTube. So there's all sorts of different ways from, depending on what your interests are, that you can communicate with other people. I'd say the things that we use most of the church are social networking, such as Facebooks, and a lot of video at the moment, in particular people posting things such as YouTube videos for services. So the number one sort of social media platform, the number one spot is Facebook, and nothing has ever been able to take Facebook off that top number one spot. There are 2.32 billion users on Facebook. Below that is YouTube, which is 1.9 billion. And then WhatsApp, Messenger are also in the billions. So there's billions of people using these social media platforms. TikTok is 500 million. However, I think these statistics were sort of the beginning of 2020. I suspect that TikTok sort of rocketed since then. And Twitter is at 13, just in case you're interested. Why is it important to know all that? Well, it's important to know who you're working with and what's the most effective and appropriate means of communication. Obviously, Facebook's got the most users, so you're more likely to reach people on Facebook. But if you work with young people, you will know and understand that Facebook isn't always the most popular amongst that age group, although they might have them. They prefer other platforms to communicate instead. But if you are communicating with the parents or an older generation, then Facebook tends to be the most ideal. It's also important to know what age groups you can subscribe to these things. So Facebook is 13. Zoom actually isn't intended for use for under 16s unless supervised by an adult and on an adult's account, whereas Skype, you can subscribe to that from 13. So I'm going to run through some of the big safeguarding concerns and issues associated with social media and the online world. But within that, I want to think more specifically about our own roles, how we keep ourselves safe, because that is obviously really, really important with the roles that we're working in. And you might think of things that you need to consider moving forward. There's lots of issues that I will not be exploring today. Seriously, I'm going to try and cram as much as I possibly can in this next hour. And I'm not going to be going into great depth about anything either, because there's just so much. It's so vast. I mean, we could be here for months just exploring some of these issues. But what I would encourage you to do, if you work with people, just work with people in any capacity, in particular children, young people, families, parents, and vulnerable adults, I would make it part of your weekly routine to actually have a look at what is out there. what the issues are and what is in the local and national news, because it's really important for us. If we're going to have any impact whatsoever in addressing some of these online issues, we need to know about them. And it's not something that appeals to me sometimes, to be honest with you, because I don't constantly live in an online world. I don't know the ins and outs of everything, but I do make a habit of trying to find out because I know how important it is. Just before I start to unpack some of the safeguarding issues, obviously today is going to be more centred around the negative aspects of the online world. So before I go into that, I want to reassure you that I honestly believe that the benefits of online far outweigh the negatives and the risks. Imagine if this pandemic had happened 20 years ago, how disconnected we would all be. I mean, people really didn't even have mobile phones 20 years ago, let alone the capabilities of being able to gather entire congregations online via Zoom or what other platform. I will also admit that I am not somebody who has ever suffered negatively as a result of the online or social media. And therefore it's easy for me to say that the positives outweigh the negatives. If you're somebody who has extensively been abused online, then for you, you will have seen firsthand the negatives and the impact that they can have upon a person. So by saying the positives outweigh the negatives, I'm not shirking the fact that actually the negatives are deeply distressing and impacting for people. In the media, you will only genuinely ever hear of the negatives. You'll obviously be familiar more with headlines such as this. I'm not sure whether you can see those properly because of my screen. But generally, we only hear about the bad things, about the horrid statistics of online, about child abuse, about scams, etc. You don't genuinely hear about the good things, and there are a lot of good things about how it connects people, and that there are a lot of positive good news stories which don't get publicised anywhere near as much as the negatives. The real issues with online are all associated with behaviour and how people use it. The issues that I'm going to talk to you are about a result of people using the internet and social media in negative ways. There's not anything specifically negative about social media. It's the way in which people use it to cause harm rather than good. And if you think about it, there's any form of communication you can think of that doesn't relate to social media. Phone calls, text messages, emails, letters, talking. If people use those forms of communication for harmful purposes, anything can be used for harmful purposes. So what I'm essentially trying to say with all this is that the internet and online get a lot of bad press, but the internet does not create the risks, it's people that do. And the internet as well, it's not really particularly invented any new concerns. Pornography, gambling, radicalisation, grooming, bullying, those things were all in existence before the internet. However, the internet does allow for easier access to people, and it creates a climate where it's easy to cause harm to people in these ways. I think as well that any new form of communication always produces anxieties. And yes, social media is still incredibly new. Whilst the World Wide Web was born in 1991, social media platforms did not come about till years later. And they were still not widely used in the beginning as they are now. It's been about the past 15 years that they've steadily gained influence. So still incredibly new and a vast way of communicating. And we are still getting used to this as a society. When telephones, it wasn't about when telephones were invented, please note that. But apparently, when telephones first became available to the public, there were the same anxieties. Many people were afraid to have one because people thought they could be listened to, their conversations listened to. Even when the telephones weren't in use, people thought that people could hear them. So many people were frightened to have them in the house. And fears obviously dispersed over the years with a better understanding, better regulations in place. And I honestly believe the same will be for social media. I think that creators of the platforms are getting better and better at regulating content. There's new laws that are coming into place to regulate our society that is now online. But as I said, it's all very new and there's still a lot to be done to make it safer. So again, just before I go into the negatives, because I don't want this all to be about negatives of online, we're just going to go into breakout rooms. Stop sharing for a minute. We're just going to go into breakout rooms just for literally a few minutes. And in those breakout rooms, see it as a competition to come up with the most positives that you possibly can do that social media can be used for. So Katry's going to put you into breakout rooms. Literally, you want to go in there for 3 minutes. So make a start and see if you can add up how many positives you can come up with in your breakout room. If you need to just bob out or get yourself a drink or anything, I'm just going to keep going straight through. But if you need to do that, then please feel free to do so. So I hope you came up with some good and positive things in your group. Shopping was the first one that came out of ours, online shopping. I won't mention a name, but another district safeguarding officer mentioned that one. But actually, there was a general feel that actually, particularly during this time, there has been a lot of positives to come from this. The fact that, you know, we can actually connect with people. And without it, I don't know where we would have been during this pandemic at all, because it's just been given that ability to actually have that social connection when we've not actually been physically able to see one another. Just going to share my screen again. So some of the other things that I kind of came up with. So it connects friends, family members across the world. That came out of our group. It promotes businesses and creates jobs. Most major organisations or charities, etc., will have social media experts really who are, or media creators who are running their social media. For small businesses, it's been a lifeline because they've been able to promote themselves so easily, so quickly. It helps with criminal investigations. I follow quite a few police, different police forces on social media, and that's really, really beneficial for them to be able to put out missing persons requests or appeal for information really quickly. It updates us quicker with information. I mean, you used to have to wait till the news was on, and if you missed the news, you'd had it. You have to wait till the next day to find out, or when the newspapers came out. Actually, you're updated with information. As soon as something big hits, you can be updated with it instantly because it'll be on some sort of social media. And if you think about the major incidents that have happened perhaps over the past few years, the bombings in Manchester Arena, that was on the news within minutes of it happening. I think it's educational. Having children at home at the moment, I really believe that it is educational. It increases our ability to try new things and gain new hobbies. YouTube is fantastic if you want to learn how to do something. We've got diverse social connections, and there is a feel-good factor and entertainment value as well. Where would we be without social media during this time? So those are the positives, and I want you to keep all those things in mind as we explore some of the negatives, because there are a lot of negative things, as I've said, about social media, and I'm going to go through them really quickly now. But bear in mind that actually there's an awful lot of positives as well, and we can sometimes dwell on the negatives too much. I think people think that we are losing so much by going online. We generally hear that quite a lot from an older generation, particularly thinking the younger generation are consumed by this, consumed by the online world, and we're losing out on social skills, etc. When as an older generation not being worried about a younger generation, that is usually what we are here for. We are here to worry about our younger ones. But generations will be different because of social media and the society we now live in. But I don't believe that it will be different in a bad way. So let's have a look at some of the negative aspects and some of the dangers and the issues to be aware of. And I'm going to try and get through as many of these as possible in the next 15 minutes or so. I'm hoping to have a little breakout room at the end where you can discuss more your specific concerns. And if there are things that you want us to do more specifically or go into more detail about, I'll take that back to our region of district safeguarding officers, and there may be sessions that we can do that are more specific than what I'm going to do today. So the first issue I want to kind of look about really is cyberbullying and trolling. I think we're all aware of what bullying is. It's something that we may have experienced ourselves, or most certainly know of people or instances of bullying. The difference between bullying in the online world is that there is very little escape from it. You cannot leave it at school or at work. Wherever you go, it goes. And people do feel that they can genuinely say things behind a screen that they wouldn't necessarily say in a face-to-face context or a face-to-face environment. Trolling is very much similar to bullying, really. It's essentially creating discord on the internet by starting quarrels or upsetting people, by posting things that are inflammatory, sometimes off-topic messages in online communities. Basically, a social media troll is someone who purposely says something controversial to get a rise out of other users. There is a huge number of negative comments online. If you ever see a video or something posted that has done the rounds, I would encourage you just to have a look at the comments section, because I'm sure that you will see some examples of trolling. One example that I've seen quite recently, and I don't know, I should have found out this lady's name. So I'm naturally just scrolling down my Facebook, come across videos, and if they interest me, I will start watching them. And one of the videos I saw recently was of this young woman who, with her hair, can make hair sculptures that are genuinely quite amazing. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. So I watched this video and I was interested to see what people were saying about the video. So I looked down the comments to see what was there. In this video, this woman had chosen not to shave underneath her armpits. Now, we know that actually societal beauty standards now are, you know, about women. In the media, it's not uncommon. It's more uncommon to see a woman who has unshaven armpits. But obviously, it's a woman's right to do whatever she wants with her body. And she had chosen not to shave under her armpits. The comments were less about the hair on her head and were more about what was underneath her armpits. And then the comments started filtering on the fact, oh, she's disgusting for having armpit hair. She's disgusting, she's dirty, she's filthy. All those things started coming up in the comments. So something that was about an amazing talent that she obviously had was taken to about her appearance. And then naturally, further down the comments you get, starts escalating. People are having conversations about how it's a woman's right to have what she wants, what she is. But then they started going into race as well. And that's how they kind of escalate into off topic. This wasn't about anything to do with that. This was about her talent, about her art form, but actually escalated into something which is about her race. And you will genuinely find that on quite a lot of videos and things online. Cyberbullying is felt to be a contributing factor to a huge increase in suicide rates amongst young people, as well as self-harm and issues surrounding mental health. It does not just affect young people. I think anybody can be targeted, and we would be very naive to think that it just affects young people. It doesn't. If you are on social media, there's every possibility that any of us could face bullying or trolling. Generally, the platforms that it happens, Instagram's number one, with Facebook, then Snapchat, WhatsApp, YouTube, etc. I will say that it's any social media platform. The reason why Instagram and Facebook are so big is because they are well-used platforms. So that's why you would find that they are higher up in terms of statistics. But generally, any social media, gaming platform, anything, it can happen. So why is it important for us to be aware of this issue? Well, there's a lot of resources out there, particularly if you work with children, young people and families, if you work with vulnerable adults. There's a lot of resources and there's a lot of help and a lot of support for people who are suffering from online bullying or trolling. But how is this an issue in churches, other than the fact that it personally affects the people that we work with? In my experience, churches and individuals have been targeted as well. I have had a good number of issues where churches have struggled with this situation. A couple of things in particular where I've had a Methodist project, the Facebook site was targeted and hit with lots of negative comments. I've had churches that have received the same attention. You know, it's rare, but it does happen. And it is genuinely quite nasty to deal with. If you're dealing with church, Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media accounts, or you're dealing with them for the circuit, a lot of circuit admins seem to get landed with the role of dealing with circuit social media accounts. Please be aware that anything you put or anything that you post could have the potential to receive negative attention and comments. And there ideally needs to be a few individuals as admins for the group, because then it's easier for people to take things down if necessary. The settings need to be checked, make sure that they're appropriate. There are a way of filtering out posts, but it can be time consuming, particularly if you've got a lot of interest in your social media platform, your social media account. You can filter out inappropriate words on some social media platforms. I would also be aware of what is going on in the life of the Methodist Church. I mean, one concern of mine is whether there will be an increase in negative postings when decisions are made about synods in the next few weeks about the Methodist report, God in Love Unites Us. People have immensely strong feelings about some things, and it's really important to be aware of things like this that could provoke negative responses on social media. Anything that's racist or discriminatory needs to be reported. You know, take a screenshot of it before removing it or deleting it. And please do report it. It's really important that we do that. There have been lots of developments in the law relating to hate crimes and online abuse. There is appeals at the moment to make trolling illegal, but it's just so difficult to police, and there aren't any specific laws at the minute. Over the past week, and I know you were talking about this in the coffee and chat time, there was a specific Zoom meeting, which I'm sure you may have seen, relating to Hanford Parish Council. If you've not seen videos in relation to this, then I would strongly urge you to do so. When I watched this, basically it's a Zoom meeting that descends into absolute chaos with people shouting and some behaviour that was just genuinely completely inappropriate. And when I watched it, I did watch it with somewhat a sense of humour, thinking, oh, this is just ridiculous. Seriously, why are they behaving in such a way? But actually then it dawned on me that sadly this type of meeting is not unfamiliar to me. We've all been in these type of meetings within the Methodist Church, perhaps not to that extreme, but I'm sure we've experienced that type of behaviour before. And the Methodist Church, and it's a form of bullying and abusive behaviour. And the Methodist Church takes that really extremely seriously, and whether that be online or face-to-face. If there are members of Methodist members or people within roles in the Methodist Church that are behaving in such ways, we really do need to speak out about it. And sometimes we've all just too often said that, you know, it's just how they are, it's just who they are, it's just how they behave. And actually, dealing with it like that is wrong. And we sometimes need to stand up and say, actually, nobody has the right to be spoken to in this way. There are processes and procedures within the Methodist Church for dealing with this type of behaviour, and it's something that I would encourage you to report if you do come across it. The next issue I just want to alert you is something, I've made this up, I call it the twisted truth, but it is a very serious issue within churches, and it affects young people. It affects young adults, parents, adults, vulnerable adults. Basically, no one is immune to this issue. And this is an issue that has a massive effect on mental health. And this is a concept that everything you see on the internet is often the best version of something, or it's fake, or it's a distorted version of reality. That's why I like to call it the twisted truth. I'm going to show a few examples of this. One of them, the first one I'm going to show you is a man that he's got his torso showing, just in case you are offended by that image. But I just thought it was a really good example to show you. So this is what I mean by, actually, a lot of people can change their appearance through clever lighting, through Photoshop, through positioning. We can change our appearance to give the best version of ourselves, or sometimes a completely fake version of ourselves. Normally, you would never see both images together, but this person wanted to demonstrate an example of this. So this is how he actually looks on the left-hand side. Looks fine, looks healthy, but actually, this is an image of him where he's added lots of muscle mass to himself through photoshopping. Now, young people will only ever see, young people and young adults will only ever see the image on the right, and they would have this perception of, actually, this is how I should be looking. This is how other people look. This is how I should be looking. And that can be really detrimental, because if you're a health fanatic at all, you will know to gain muscle mass, like this person in the right image, takes a lot of dedication, commitment, hours and hours of work, lots of which people can't achieve because they just don't have that time and that capacity to do. As long as people are healthy, generally eating well and exercising, that's enough. But in order to look like the person on the right, you need to be really dedicated. And quite a lot of people, when they're not getting the results they want, then you turn to other things such as steroid use, over abuse at the gym, etc. Because sometimes the person on the right, it's unachievable. Some other examples, we've got this beautiful young woman. Photoshop can do anything, including just erase every flaw that we consider on our skin, every wrinkle. We know that nobody's got flawless skin. We've all got wrinkles or scars or stretch marks or anything like that. But Photoshop just removes that and takes it away. But then it gives a perception that actually this is what I should be looking like. We even do it with food. You know, we all know that this is sort of like an Instagram picture of food. We all know in reality it kind of looks like something on the right once you've sort of mushed it all up a little bit. But we would never post a picture of the one on the right. We would always post a picture of the beautiful looking food. We do it with weather, we do it with scenery. You know, there's nothing wrong with the image on the left, but let's stick a rainbow in and some beautiful fields. You know, people Photoshop the holiday photos to make the weather look better and all sorts of things, just to make it appear better than what it actually is. So why does this seem to, why does this impact everyone? Well, it seems to be a human condition that we cannot help but compare ourselves to others. And when we're comparing ourselves to something that is a distorted version of the truth or is a complete lie, it can severely impact on mental health. So for issues such as body image, self-esteem, that can affect all of us. But imagine if you're at a time of transitioning through adolescence, it can be particularly challenging. It affects males, females. There is increase in eating disorders, particular males using steroids, overdoing it at the gym. High rates of suicide are linked to this particular issue. Obviously, people commit suicide for a range of different factors, contributing factors, but this mental health, this disturbs mental health to the point where some people feel that they should take their own life. There's an increase in demand for cosmetic surgery from all age groups. Over the past 10 years, this has doubled. People are trying to get cosmetic surgery younger. Obviously, there are age limits, but we've got sort of girls, boys, 8 years old already talking about cosmetic surgery at that age. I think probably this is probably one of the most subtle and less talked about issues and dangers with the online world. And generally, people do believe what is posted is real without questioning. If I, on my Facebook site, and I do this, we all do it. If I post a picture of my children doing the homeschooling, I will post a nice picture of them doing it where they sat down doing the work, hard at work together. I won't post a picture where my daughter is having a meltdown in the corner and my son's lying in the middle of the floor not doing any of his work. I'm not going to post that because that might show a bad image of me, and I don't want to show that. I want to show good things and good things only. I think there are there are lots of regulations being put in place in relation to this. One recent one is that when a celebrity or an influencer is advertising beauty products, they're not allowed to filter or won't be allowed to filter them anymore because that seems false advertising. So that's something that's going to come into effect. And that might not seem major, but when you've got people trying to buy every beauty product to look like their celebrity, advertising them and falling into some sort of depression when they can't achieve that flawless look that they're after, these regulations are really, really big. Believe it or not, sometimes we can do this as churches as well. We promote the best sides of ourselves to the point where sometimes we can fall into that twisted truth of distorted reality. Let's face it, if we said on our social media or our website, on arrival at church, you will be greeted by Mr. X, who will give you a frosty welcome because he insists on being in welcoming duty, but has as much welcoming skills as a grizzly bear, we're not going to get many takers, are we? So we advertise ourselves in a certain way as welcoming, but that might not actually be the case when you've got Mr. X on the door. We advertise ourselves as modern or contemporary because we allowed ourselves to once play a Matt Redman song in the church. You know, it's all that things. Actually, we really need to be truthful about who we are as churches and who we appeal to. We're not going to appeal to everybody. If you want to appeal to all ages, we need to make radical, drastic steps to do so, not just put it as a tagline somewhere on our website or social media. Throughout COVID, whilst services have been online, I have seen much evidence of this twisted truth. With some humour, really. I've seen quite a bit of it emerging. And I suspect everyone here who has ever had to record themselves doing something is guilty of recording it more than once, unless it's live, of course, because we want to put the best image of ourselves out there. I film quite regularly for services, and I remember on one occasion, someone from my church contacted me afterwards and said, how polished it all looked and how professional I really looked. And I didn't dare tell them that I'd filmed it about 10 times with my husband stood on a table with one of those big sort of halo lights hovering above my head. If you could have seen her behind the screenshot, it didn't really look that polished. But we do really want to put the best image of ourselves out there. On a profoundly serious note, the pressure to try and be perfect can sometimes take us away from what we are doing and why we are doing it. I must say I have hated every single minute of doing online services. It takes me twice as long, and the quality that my church are looking for has meant that I've had to invest far more than I would like to in filming equipment. We did get to a stage, and I can say this because my church isn't part of any of these districts, we did get to the stage where we said that we would screen test local preachers to see how they appeared on camera. You know, as churches, we want to produce things that are quality and that look slick and professional and that matches what other organisations can produce, and that's a positive thing, and I'm in agreement with that. But I would just urge you to stray away from that twisted truth and embrace actually what society might see as our flaws and imperfections. We also start comparing ourselves to others, what other churches are doing, what other individuals are doing. Before, we couldn't really do this. We didn't know what church down the road was doing. But now the fact that church down the road has got their service online and we can watch it and see what they're doing, we can see services across the districts. We can watch 20 services on a Sunday morning if we wanted to. We're led down paths of thinking, theirs looks better than ours. Theirs gets more likes than ours. How well are they doing in comparison to us? Let's just be kind to one another and kind to ourselves. Not every church or circuit has a professional video editor or a sound technician. Whatever we put out there is for the glory of God to expand the gospel message. And we are doing our best, and we will get better at doing it. And hopefully more and more people engage with what we're doing. But there is so much perceived perfection out there already on the internet. I would just not compare yourself to it. Sorry, I had some more pictures. Just want to mention about grooming briefly. Grooming online has been linked more with children and young people in the past. However, in my experience, anyone can be groomed and anyone can be targeted. Grooming is essentially making contact with a person, often through social media. And there's that targeting stage. So you target someone, you find someone to target, you form a friendship with them. Sometimes there can be a loving relationship before it turns into an abusive relationship. Grooming does tend to happen more online, as it's genuinely easy to befriend someone from behind a computer, particularly if you're pretending to be somebody that you're not. Previously, before online, grooming had to happen face-to-face. And in order for that to happen, people generally needed to be charming, look a certain way, act a certain way. It would take a long time to befriend and establish trust. Online grooming, literally anybody could do it. Anybody could engage in that behaviour. And it can be immensely quick to groom somebody online. With young people, there's often grooming for sexual imagery, sexual contact, or illegal activity, often drugs, trying to infiltrate schools by grooming individuals, young people, to sell drugs in schools. With older people or an older generation, what we tend to find is that adults tend to be groomed for financial gain or influence or power game. And once a person's generally been groomed, they are trapped in that situation through fear. You know, for example, I will show these images to your parents, or I will tell people what you've done. And there's lots of signs and indicators about grooming. I won't go into those now because it's just such a vast issue. We could spend an entire session on it. But I would encourage you to look those up and look at the different signs and indicators, depending on whether you work with children, young people, or vulnerable adults. I've had very few instances in my role as a district safeguarding officer that have been reported to me of young people being groomed. Actually, but I've had lots and lots of issues where members of the congregation or people who work with vulnerable adults are concerned that the adults that they're working with have been groomed. So please don't think that it's just a young people issue. It isn't. It's adults as well that can be groomed. I've seen grooming happen within the church. Entire congregations or individuals have been groomed by people of influence, or those would wish to cause harm to others. And the reasons for grooming are not always obvious, and they sometimes can be quite subtle. I've seen grooming happen where a person from the church wanted the church council to make a certain decision, to try to groom the entire church council into thinking and believing a certain viewpoint to make a decision about something. We always need to be mindful of our behaviour as well. In the roles that we have positions of trust, and it would genuinely be quite easy to manipulate people and situations. Sometimes people do it without even being aware that they're doing it, and we have positions of such privilege that our concern should always be about how we are using that privilege. And please remember as well that actually the reverse can happen. We ourselves are not immune to being groomed. And some people specifically target people in the roles that we're in because they feel that we're in a position of trust. If I get them on side, if I groom them and get them to think that I'm a really trusted and respected person, then everybody else will believe it as well. So we're not immune to being groomed either. Sorry, I'm flicking through because I know I'm going to run out of time. I just want to quickly mention peer pressure. Now, this is generally something, it's more of a young person, younger adults issue. Risk-taking behaviour is much more common in young people. Generally, the part of the brain that works out the consequences of behaviour and actions, it doesn't fully develop in females until the late teens, so 18, 19. For males, it can actually be the early 20s, which is generally why young people young adults, can be targeted to be groomed or for radicalisation or for extreme views and behaviour. The other thing that's really common in recent times is that young people are being peer pressured into completing challenges under the premise of it being fun. But there's a huge risk to some of these challenges that has resulted in life-threatening injuries or in some cases death. Now, most of the challenges out there are generated in YouTube or TikTok, and they're harmless. For instance, I'm sure a lot of you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge from a few years ago. I think most people did the Ice Bucket Challenge where, you know, raise money for charity. There was very little harm associated with that other than you got a freezing bucket of ice over your head. But some of the challenges that people have been asked to do are really, really concerning. One of them from earlier this year was the Skull Breaker Challenge, where you have two people that stand on either side of you and one in the middle, and you kick the legs from the person in the middle. And obviously, most of the instances, they fall back, and you would film them doing that. Actually, that has resulted in massive and serious injuries to people, and there was huge warnings about the dangers of doing that. The other one that was even more concerning was, I think in 2019, it kind of kicked off, called the Blackout Challenge, where young people were encouraged to compete in a challenge where they would choke themselves to the point where they nearly passed out. They could either do that themselves, or sometimes they would get assistance from other people to do that. And as you can imagine, that some people took that too far, and that did result in death with some people, or serious and significant injuries and brain trauma, etc. Why I mentioned it earlier, if you work in certain roles, it's really important to keep updated with what is out there. Well, this is a prime example of that. It's really important to be up to date. What is out there? What are the latest crazes? So we can put warnings out there as churches as well. Young people do heed warnings. They can't necessarily, they can understand risk when it's presented to them, but they can't necessarily always see it for themselves. And sometimes we can have a massive role to play in that, in as churches, in trying to encourage these things not to happen. Again, I'm just going to really graze over this, but I could spend an hour or so at least on this session. Sexting is a huge thing at the moment. Generally, it's more of an issue with young people and younger adults. If you're working with young people in a role, I would encourage you to engage and respond to this issue. Sexting is the sending out of sexual images to another person, whether that via any means electronically, not just texting. It could be by any social media. And it might sound insane to many of us why people would do this, but actually it's part of a young person's development curiosity. But we can all, I think, see the dangers of doing this. Obviously, the images can get into the hands of someone who's much older. They can be used as indecent imagery online and could generally be shared amongst peers. Images being shared for a young person can have a massive impact on mental health. It can impact future career prospects, breakdown of family relationships, as well as depression, anxiety, self-harm, etc. So it's a really big issue that I think that we can have a voice on as a church. Also, something that young people don't necessarily tend to realise is that taking or receiving pictures of anyone under the age of 18 is actually illegal. And back in the early days, a lot of young people were charged for taking images of themselves and sending them to others. The police do tend to sit a little bit lighter with this issue now, but it's still illegal activity to take a picture of anybody who, an inappropriate image, even if it is of yourself, if you're under that age. 1 in 3 sexual images online are actually self-generated of children. So these are images that are generally used by sex offenders, and they are self-generated. By that I mean that the young people have taken them themselves and shared them themselves. And this could be that they've been groomed to do that, or it could be that they shared it with a boyfriend or girlfriend and then that it's been shared afterwards. 95% of images are of girls that are out there, indecent images online, and 76% of those images are actually of 11 to 13-year-olds, so quite young. And this is the issue that young people are least willing to talk to about their parents. So again, if you're in that type of role, working with children and young people, it can be, you can be a lifeline in that role for some young people who are struggling with this issue. Just mentioning parents, not that parents are a safeguarding issue, that's not what I'm trying to get at by putting that there. What I'm saying is actually parents are really worried. I'm a parent of an 8-year, nearly 9-year-old, and this is terrifying for me. This is just, I know that this is coming up. At one point she will have a phone. She is on the iPad, but that's a family iPad that I've got control over. And honestly, it absolutely terrifies me and scares me. And I think most of the parents are also feeling that as well. All parents of young people and teenagers nowadays will not have grown up in an online world. In another few generations, actually, we'll have a set of parents that are much more familiar with these issues. But there's just so much that we don't understand. Any help, and I just throw this out there, that any help that you can give to young people, families, grandparents, I guarantee anything that you put out there to help them with these issues and help them talk to their young people or their children will be well received. I guarantee it. The other thing I just want to briefly mention is addictions. There are all sorts of addictions, and something that we're familiar with. Obviously, social media hasn't invented addictions, but the couple that are really associated with online and are a current record high are gambling and pornography, addictions to gambling and pornography. Gambling has been a huge issue throughout this pandemic. More people are at home, more people are bored, lots of people have been furloughed, and it's just an entertainment value. But then you get warped into this system of and these triggers of gambling. It's so easy to do online. Literally, you can be set up to gamble on your phone or electronic device within a matter of minutes. And there are regulators trying to address some of the concerns with gambling online, but it is a tough issue. Even if you put caps on spending, it's a tough issue to tackle. There's lots of help from organisations, and you can receive help from your GP, who'll refer you to individuals or various therapies. Pornography is a huge issue as well at the moment. When I did a similar social media workshop a couple of years ago, and I did a bit of research about pornography, and I wanted to find out how easy it was to actually access pornography. I've never been on any pornographic websites or anything like that in my life. I didn't know how easy it was. So in the purposes of research, and I told my husband I was doing this, I said, I'm going to try and see how easy it is to get onto a pornographic video. I was gobsmacked. I was absolutely gobsmacked at how quick I could have watched, didn't watch, but how quickly I could have watched a pornographic video. The websites didn't ask for age, didn't ask for contact details, didn't ask for names, didn't ask for anything. I could have been anybody, and I could have got on that within 3 clicks, I think it would have taken to get onto that video and watch a pornographic video. There are, again, more regulations supposed to be coming into place, but actually they're not strong enough. 12% of all websites are pornographic. There are, per person on the planet, 12.5 videos per person on the planet that are pornographic. Generally, a quarter of 8-year-olds have seen pornographic images, and then that increases obviously as the age gets older. You can see some of the statistics on the screen. 45% of young Brits say pornography has been their main source of sex education. 62% of Brits have watched porn in the last month. 3 in 4 young women believe that pornography has led to increasing pressure to act a certain way. And there's all sorts of negative effects as well about unrealistic attitudes to sex and consent. That becomes a massive safeguarding issue. More negative attitudes towards roles, casual relationships, risky sexual behaviour, which is becoming increasingly problematic, and unrealistic expectations of body image, etc. Those are kind of some of the issues, and it does affect people in the church. Premier Magazine did a massive statistical research into how widespread an issue pornography was in the church. 30% of church leaders, this was a couple of years ago, 30% of church leaders access pornography once a month. 32% of Christian men say they've got a porn addiction. 90% of Christians believe that the church does not adequately support those who struggle with pornography. 75% of Christian men have admitted to watching pornography, and 10% of Christian men have paid for sex. So what can the church do? I think we can start talking about these issues. I'm a big campaigner for, this is outside my role in the Methodist Church, I'm a big campaigner for regulations and tighter regulations to be put on pornographic videos. But we rarely discuss this as a church. We rarely get involved with it because there's elements of embarrassment and shame in Christian communities. And the only thing that we can do to tackle these issues and provide support is actually talking about them. Just want to go into scams. Scams are my #1 issue at the moment. But again, this is a whole session issue. In fact, when I was preparing for this session, I got a phone call on my personal mobile, and I answered it, and it said, it said something like your national insurance number is being used for illegal purposes. Please press 1 before the police arrest you. And then it just kept repeating that. Press 1 before you are arrested. A police officer is on his way to come and arrest you. And it's just such an ideal, I wish I could have recorded it and played it. It's just such an ideal, version of a scam, really, because it's that pressure and that fear to respond to something. And by using an item such as a national insurance number, every UK citizen generally has a national insurance number. So that's where the fear comes from. Scams are a real issue. They are increasingly getting better and more sophisticated. But companies and organisations and fraud squads are getting better as well. So Google, good on Google, they have blocked 18 million coronavirus scams emails every day. That's what they're blocking. Obviously, they won't be able to block everything, but they're already doing a good job at blocking a lot of stuff. They are really getting convincing scams. I just get targeted by them all the time. I feel like I'm a scam radar person, but scams are a real issue for people. This is a common example of one that I've had from the government. I've had loads of these from the government. I think they target me. They must know I'm due some sort of tax refund because I get them constantly all the time. The one that really nearly got me out and was so annoyed that I was expecting a parcel. There's been a lot of these because more people are online shopping. I was expecting a parcel, and this one came through saying that we tried to deliver your parcel, but you weren't there. And then you had to click on a link. Nearly clicked on that link because I knew I was due a parcel, but actually it was another scam. The tip I always use is look at the internet address, because one thing that they've not been able to convincingly do is create convincing email addresses. So the email addresses you'll find usually are a mixture of numbers and letters and quite random. It will always be official email address if it's from somebody official. There's plenty of things you can do to protect yourself, strengthening passwords, computer settings, all that type of thing. Scams are the #1 thing that are reported to me as a district safeguarding officer at the moment, and there is very little that I can do about it, unfortunately. It's not my area of expertise. I can encourage people to report them. Action for Fraud is somewhere that you can report scams, and I do encourage people to do that. But I think the reason I get a lot of questions about scams is that people are really fearful about adults who are new to the online world or recently using the online world. And there's a lot of resources that you can promote to help people with online safety. But why is this an issue for the church? Why am I talking to you about scams? Well, I think many of my district safeguarding officer colleagues would probably question me on this as well. Why is this a church issue? But actually, we've got to see people as whole people. We've got to see them holistically. And actually, this is a massive issue for a lot of our potentially vulnerable adults and those of an older generation who can't decipher what are scams. And there have been lots of people who have been conned out of money, particularly in relation to the COVID vaccine from our churches recently. So I think that actually, when we see people holistically, actually, we've got to take this seriously as an issue and see what we can potentially do to help support people, particularly when we are encouraging people to go online for church purposes. We're encouraging people to go online. We need to make sure that they are safe. Just speaking of people who aren't, those who are new to online or not online, about a year ago, statistically, over 75s, 51% of them were not online. I will be interested to see what that statistic is now. I think that's a statistic from a year ago. I suspect that over 75s have been engaging with the online world like never before. But this is the highest category age group within our church membership, over 70s. And they are statistically about over half of them could not be online. And there's so much that we can learn from our older generation. I'm just very, very wary that sometimes when we try and move to an online world, that we're leaving some of them behind. And I know in our district at the moment, we're trying to do much more online. So we're trying to get rid of paper. You're printing things off because obviously it's better for the environment, it's better for costings and things like that. But it's just giving some thought really to the fact that actually we've got a good group of people within our churches that won't be able to access things online, and how we try and make room for them within this online world. I mean, again, we could spend a long time discussing that, but just to draw your attention to it really. So just a few more other considerations for our role, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to just go into breakout rooms. I know I'm running short on time, but hopefully we'll have 5-minute discussion at the end. Our safeguarding policies on social media are under the Well section of the Methodist website. There are policies and guidance on social media working with children and young people, and that's all we've got at the moment. There are other policies possibly in development around social media and around all the other questions that we might have that don't necessarily just relate to children and young people, because we're obviously working with adults online. We're all working online, aren't we? So we are in discussions about addressing some of the other questions that you might have. But if you do have any specific questions, then either put them in the chat and I'll look at them later and send some email responses out, or you can, more than happy for you to email myself or another district safeguarding officer if you've got specific questions. The main safeguarding policy, procedures and guidance for the Methodist Church is on the Methodist website. This is a policy that we should all be aware of in our roles, whatever role you hold. There are conducts of good working practice in this policy, those who work with children and young people and those who work with adults. There's one for both. And this code of conduct is something that we should all know about and all be following. The safeguarding policies for me are effectively our insurance policies. If you follow what's in there, it will ensure a good and effective level of safety for you in your role. But what about transferring that to online? Because it is a face-to-face, it is about conduct face-to-face. Well, what I would say is actually a lot of our practice does remain the same. Our conduct remains the same, online or offline. So it's still not appropriate to meet with a group of young people with only one adult. It's still not appropriate to use sexual language and content with working with children, vulnerable adults or young people. It's still not appropriate to accept expensive gifts off children and young people. All of that is still applicable whether you're online, face-to-face or not. We don't let our boundaries slip in the online world. Actually, in the online world, it's far easier to misinterpret things than it is face-to-face. As well as our Lord and Saviour, GDPR, data protection, is king. And I think that all of us will be in roles where we handle personal data in some capacity. Obviously, if you're in an administration role, you will do that more intensively than in some other roles. We need to be storing personal information in secure ways. We need to be making sure we blind copy people into group emails and not sharing anything without consent. If you feel that at any point your data security has been breached, you need to inform your line manager of that, because that's something that needs reporting. It's worth discussing security with your line manager, making sure that you have the right resources and equipment to keep people's personal details safe. That's something we all need to be responsible for doing. I would encourage you, if you're not certain about something online, I'm not certain about lots of things online, believe me. As I said, I'm not a digital expert by any means. But what I would encourage you to do is not use it with others until you are really confident with it. So if it's a new app or social media platform or anything like that, I would subscribe to it, find out about how it works, check out the privacy settings, read about it online. And when you are confident, at that point you can use it with others. I think we always need to be mindful about what we are posting and what we are sharing on our church and work social media. The times that we are posting it is really important. My church, again, my church is not in any of these districts. I feel like I've landed my church in it a little bit this session. My church has a WhatsApp group for people who are involved in planning the church services, and they are always sending messages at like 11 o'clock at night and beyond. And I always keep my phone next to me at night because it's my alarm. For one thing, I use it as my alarm clock, but my husband works late nights. So I like to keep it with me because I feel safer with it near me. I don't want to switch it off, but I do not want to get messages about song choices at midnight. And I think that's something we just need to be really wary of. When are we sending messages, and making sure we're not sending things and posting things late at night. Our conduct on our social media accounts needs to always be appropriate, and that's our personal social media accounts as well as our work ones. And I often get this sort of phrase, well, what I do in my personal life is separate. And it is, but you cannot get away from the fact that you represent the Methodist Church in the role that you do. For instance, if you are a youth worker in a Methodist church and you get investigated for hate crimes, you might have carried them out, nothing to do with your role in the Methodist Church. It might have been separate. Still, the headlines that will hit the social media, the media, will be youth worker works for the Methodist Church, has been arrested for because that's what they'll associate you with, because you represent the Methodist Church. So what we like, what we post, what we share, even on our own personal sites, our conduct always needs to be appropriate. There have been many people, not necessarily in the Methodist Church, who have lost jobs in business or education just because they posted something or liked something that was inflammatory or discriminatory or abusive. And just a little word of warning, 67% of job employers will check out a person's social media before the interview, just in case you're headed for any interviews anytime soon. Lastly, I just wanted to mention unwanted attention, and this happens really frequently. I think we're a target, the Methodist Church, for some of these things. Because our details are generally widely available in the roles that we carry out, if you tend to work with the Methodist Church, normally your email will be on some sort of website. You can sometimes get unwanted attention, unwanted emails. In my role over the past few years, I've had to put out 5 or 6 warnings about individuals that are specifically targeting people from the church with messages that are either concerning or inappropriate. So if you ever receive any unwanted messages or inappropriate messages, I would inform your line manager, but also your district administrator and your district safeguarding officer, because they will be able to keep a track of whether this is a sort of district-wide thing, which actually sometimes they are. And sometimes we can put warnings out. I remember quite recently, actually, we had to put a warning out to all female presbyters that were being targeted. It may be someone's targeting you specifically. I had a circuit administrator a few years ago that was persistently targeted by one individual. I've also had entire circuit full of circuit staff that have been targeted by an individual as well with abusive messages. It's really important to report these things, and there are things that can be done if you're experiencing that kind of unwanted attention. Just don't feel that you have to put up with it. Actually, there are things that we can do. So we're all working in areas where concerns might be brought to us about a whole wide range of different matters, be that online or not. Please do contact your district safeguarding officer if you are concerned about anything at all. That is why we are here. This is why we have the roles that we do. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left now because timing, like I said, is not my best strong point. But I just wanted us to go into breakout rooms just for 5 minutes before we break for lunch, because I have rattled through quite a lot of issues there. And I know that some of you will want to know more details about some of the things that I've said, or you might have other things that you want to know information about, or you might have concerns that are really specific to the role that you're in. So I just wanted to go into breakout rooms for a few minutes, if that's okay, Katrin, just to talk about what are the things that you want to know more about, what are the things that particularly concern you in your roles, and if somebody in your group can write those down, and if you can email them to me, I'll put my email address back up again. What I will do, I will have a conversation with our district safeguarding officers in the region, and our learning network as well. And it may be that actually we can put on some more specific sessions that are related to some of the really specific concerns that you have, rather than it being quite general. So just a few minutes, literally a few minutes in breakout rooms before we break for lunch. So just before we finish break for lunch, and we're back at 1 o'clock, generally some of the issues that I've mentioned now are issues that the church just doesn't really engage with at all. And some things that we can all do as part of our roles is be praying for these issues. Very rarely do we find trolling within our prayers of intercession, or issues around sexting in our prayers of intercession. So that it's really, really important. Actually, we need to be engaging with these issues and speaking about them as churches as much as possible. I think the more we increase our knowledge and our presence and have a voice as a church into some of these issues, then the more impact that we can have. If we don't know about these issues, then we can't really have a voice. And that's something that I would encourage you all to try to do within our church roles and our churches as well. I would really appreciate you if you've got any comments and things that you can email me. You can find my details on the Yorkshire North East Methodist website. But just before we finish, I just wanted to say a prayer. This is a prayer that I came across a couple of years ago. And the first time I read it, I thought, this is just insane. This is a really crazy prayer. It's called a social media prayer, but actually, the more and more I read it, actually, the more important it feels, particularly during the time that we're in. So let us just pray. Lord, bless all the bloggers. Inspire all the Instagrammers. Bring wisdom and hope to all those on WhatsApp. May faith shine through on Facebook. May all tweeters be temperate in tone. May the spirits be within all those who Zoom, Skype, and TikTok. Give grace to all on Google+. May those on Flickr always be able to picture you. Watch over all those on YouTube. Grace all those engaging in digital ministry and mission. Fill them with wisdom, courage, understanding, love, and trust in you. Amen.